There are a few surviving 18th century rifles that were obviously not made by trained hands. The shaping of the stocks ranging from amateurish to downright crude, with furniture, locks, and barrels often salvaged from guns whose stocks were broken beyond repair. Some even have forged iron furniture, bringing to mind, but not to be confused with, the guns that would be forged in the mountains of the middle and southern states during the following century. But unlike the distinctive Southern mountain rifles of the 19th century, many of which were made by very skilled craftsmen, such as the Grosses, the Beans, and the Gillespies, these crude 18th century cousins are, in my opinion, the children of necessity, made for someone who was either unwilling or unable to pay a skilled gunsmith. Please note that I avoid the use of the term poor boy rifle. I firmly believe this is a late 19th century or 20th century term that originally meant any muzzleloader. As to who made them, it is impossible to say for certain, although, as I already mentioned, a craftsman trained in another trade might make a passable gun. As to the cruder specimens, I personally believe these were made by the owners themselves. Often the inventories of property belonging to deceased frontiersmen listed rifle barrels, and it is possible that they would buy the barrels and stock themselves. I can find no mention of locks being listed, but I still think this call is a good one. Given their reputation for improvisation, I don't doubt that they were capable of stocking a gun, and such a practice better accounts for some of the cruder guns that still exist. For those guns that were apparently stocked by a master but lacking in the final details, I've never seen one, but I've heard of some who claim to. Inventories of deceased gunsmiths often list unfinished rifles. Such guns bought and estate account for these anomalies much better than some kind of 18th century gunsmith-made rifle kit. Smoothbores were also used, although by the latter half of the century they were not nearly as popular as the rifle in the western parts of the middle and southern colonies. Up until now, I have only mentioned the musket, but various types of fowling pieces were common throughout the colonies. As if to add to the confusion of later researchers, there was also the smooth rifle, a gun with a smoothbore barrel, usually octagon to round, that was stocked to look like a rifle. A barrel which is octagon for its full length usually indicates a gun which was originally rifled, even if the rifling no longer remains. A rifle requires a much thicker barrel wall than a smooth bore, and the purpose of the octagon barrel is to give some grace to the heavier barrel. The octagonal portion of the Fowler barrel serves the same purpose. It allows a thick breech, but one with more grace than the cheaper, fully round barrel of a musket. Since they do not need the extra thickness to support rifling, the barrels of muskets and fowling pieces are usually round and quite thin at the muzzle. I can think of no reason why a gunsmith would make a fully octagonal smoothbore, which would not only be a waste of iron, but be unnecessarily heavy. Like Joe Kindig, I believe those smoothbores were octagon barrels which survive today had their rifling deliberately removed to convert them to smoothbores, or they wore them out and then maybe they converted them. Removing the rifling from an old gun may appall us now, but 150 years ago it made perfect sense to a poor farmer with an old worn-out rifle who found himself in need of a shotgun. There we go. I can find very few references to the use of smoothbores by those who lived on the Pennsylvania, Virginia, Carolina frontier in the latter part of the century, other than those of some type of military status. But Smith did record an amusing anecdote about a joke he played on one of his backcountry hosts, using the man's newly acquired fowling piece. But the fact remains that the rifle was the preferred weapon of the frontiersmen. This was well known by the time of the Revolution, for in early stages of the war, several companies of expert riflemen were recruited from the western counties of Virginia. We're going to leave that right there. Love you. God bless.